Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast as part of the LabZtorm Squal. This audio podcast as part of the Sepulchre and Storm and Bostics. This audio podcast as part of the Shipmo Squad, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Lobostics Productions. And as part of this audio podcast, a sort of an intro into this intro to this audio podcast, and around this audio podcast, a series or chapter. So evidence suggests that coping strategies play an important role in the way that young people respond or react to, for example, life events. Over the past two or so decades, objective self-report coping sort of surveys and questionnaires, for example, have been sort of a main methodology of choice for most investigators in around in around coping in around in around in around in around understanding coping. And during the 1970s, sort of in the early early 1970s, early 1970s and around the 1980s, coping research moved towards a excuse me moved towards a modality that primarily was referred to as conscious processes. Coping is typically a sort of a is typically conceptualized as a conscious response or reaction to external or stressful or negative a negative external or stressful and negative sort of events or triggers. And when confronted with specific challenges, challenges or when confronted with specific challenges, young people tend to be specific in selecting the kinds of coping sort of strategies that they are likely to that they are probable to implement or utilize. One additional factor mediating between coping strategies and efficacy, or between coping strategies and illnesses, for example, may well be the nature of a situational sort of stressor. So for healthcare providers, there is a socio-economical intrigue to support the development of active coping strategies in young people with chronic illnesses. At the same time, much of the research surrounding co- surrounding coping has been restricted or constrained for example, in around the psychological aspects, and in the stress in amongst the stress coping paradigm, paradigm. Coping is sort of defined or informed as a constantly changing process wherein cognitive and emotional and attitude manage external and internal demands, and the challenging consequently changing also pertains to those coping strategies that are appraised through through taxing or exceeding the resources of those challenged. Some investigations and some investigators have viewed coping as a particular category of adaptation that also occurs in young healthy cohorts when confronted with unusual or demanding challenges. Researchers consider sort of coping as an inherent aspect of a person's functioning, and maintain that no dysfunction occurs as long as an individual copes with stress triggers in a constructive on a constructive in a constructive way. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of the Sepulchre and Storm. This audio podcast as part of the as part of the LabZtorm and Squal. This audio podcast as part of the Shipmode Squad, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Lobostics production.